Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second webinar by the Architecture of Business Company. And today we would like to talk to you about the way to an architected target operating model. Next slide, please, Michael. Just to recap why we're here today, is really I'd like to say that we have a pretty straightforward agenda ahead of us. First of all, we would like to reintroduce the architecture of business concept of designing and implementing target operating models to deliver organization strategic goals and market needs. Michael and I have already performed the webinar earlier this year, in which we went through the idea in some detail and also gave a real-life example. Today, we will just recap a few key points of the architecture of business approach. Second, what we will specifically spend some time today is that we will focus on how to implement the architecture of business approach in any organization. While many would naturally assume that the architecture of business is relevant only for commercial or for-profit entity, it is not the case. In reality, it can be applied to any organization where a defined result needs to be achieved in the most effective and efficient way, be it a government department or a non-profit. The architecture of business, it is about achieving the result in the most effective way. And third is that we will answer your immediate questions. Please send them on to the organizer through the chat function on your screen. We will leave some time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. We will cover as much ground as we can today and welcome any further approach online. Our contact details will be displayed at the end of the presentation. Michael, please. And just before we go, we really wanted to give a brief introduction to the architecture of business company. What Michael and I are going to talk about today came as a result of many years of professional and academic experience in the consumer, business services, and financial industries, in operational strategy and IT leadership roles. So we now offer the architecture of business methodology to resolve concrete organizational challenges. We are also leading adoption of this approach by companies throughout the world, through executive workshops and training courses. Michael, over to you to introduce yourself, please.
Hello, here's Michael Pulin. I am in industry for about 30 years and worked for a couple decades on international development and promotion of orientation on service. The last 10 years of my work were about aspects of business orientation on service that have resulted in the design of the concept of architecture of business system that exists in any enterprise, regardless its industry domain and without information technology. Kirill?
Thank you, Michael. As for myself, I have 20 years of international experience in strategy and operations, in consultancy and client-side roles. And I spent the last 10 years with Sodexo in France. In strategic planning, country management, I was the CEO of Sodexo entity in Israel, and global transformation roles. And specifically, I was engaged in a huge transformational initiative to overhaul Sodexo operating model in design and implementation capacity. Our profiles are, of course, available on LinkedIn, and the architecture of business website is www.architectureofbusiness.com. Michael, please.
We're starting with the next section. Every organization needs an architected target operating model. Kirill?
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much, Michael. Indeed, just really a brief introduction, just really a few words on why every organization really needs an architected target operating model. Michael, please. In reality, of course, the concept of operating model is not new. In fact, an an operating model of sorts exists in every organization. For as long as a company or an organization and team is engaged in any manufacturing or service-oriented activity, any output activity, in fact, it would have an operating model. But architecting this operating model to effectively achieve expected results is not always done, which is why many organizations waste precious resources and time to achieve expected results. In a nutshell, an operating model architected through the architecture of business approach realizes strategy in the most effective and efficient way. This is more than simple process re-engineering or improvement, although it certainly has its place. An optimal target operating model synchronizes organizational capabilities and structures with changing market conditions to ensure organizational response. Important also is the fact that a well-designed and implemented operating model is a major agent of stakeholder engagement in any organization. Vast majority of teams feel that strategy is not really their job and do not always see how what they do every day slots into the bigger picture. But by putting everyone on the same page and by making it clear how each individual process and effort contributes to the overall successful result, a good operating model will boost team performance and buy-in. When there is a transformation journey underway, for example, an operating model will also help answer questions such as what it is for me and what do I need to deliver in this new setup. Michael?
Let's talk about widespread disconnects between strategy and TOM. The ways how we constructing target operating model in conjunction with the corporate strategy can cause a disconnect between them in too many cases. Here we explain only 3 typical cases among the most severe ones. The case A. Our operational experience and best practices are based on the past and current market environment. We used to think that basically we might need some refinements or enhancements to address new strategic tasks, and this will be enough. It is a reasonable assumption until the pace of internal changes in the organization is adequate to the pace of external changes. However, many specialists and reviews now outline that the changes in the economic environment accelerate at an unprecedented pace, and our experience, inherited from the past, cannot lead us into the future anymore. In this new economic regime, we need our strategic and operating models to be linked with the changed markets much stronger than before. The case B. The practice shows that attempts of defining and building TOM directly from the strategy tends to miss serious internal issues in organizational and operational structures, as well as in the technology capabilities. This results in missing certain crucial business capabilities during planning and implementation. A firm operating structure, which we used to use, cannot effectively heal and remodel itself when the pace of changes outside comes close or exceeds the pace of changes inside the company. External changes are global now, and local authorities try to leash them with the local regulations. Altogether, they impact the value of the company's outcome almost daily and at a large scale. The case C. In many cases, a practice of designing TOM is based only on the needs of separate business units and opinions of their management about the market. This sets the enterprise with a risk of disintegration, because the accelerating market changes make a merge of operating management and simultaneous market responsiveness a very difficult task for one person. Plus, such market leaves no time for balancing individual opinions of the siloed lobes with the strategic enterprise position. This case calls or even yells for separation of duties. There is a need for a flexible, elastic, and intelligent mechanism that can take care about the integral and solidified appearance and behavior of the company in the dynamic market. We offer such mechanism, and we call this mechanism architecture of business concept and approach. Note that the architecture of business is not the same as a business architecture that you might heard from your CIO or other technology people. We will spend a couple of slides to remind the core elements of this concept. We propose a solution that bridges the majority of disconnects between the corporate strategy, TOM, and dynamic impacts of the market. This solution is based on the concept of architecture of business, or AOB. The AOB sits in each formal business organization. The AOB is caused by the fact of existence of this organization and nothing else. The AOB is based on the intrinsic architecture of business system that is constructed when the organization is defined the first time and then evolves with each new corporate strategy. It can explain why a business organization is what it is, why its management is easier in one case than in another. The AOB harmonizes the enterprise because it works for managing the business changes in the company in the most effective way. The concept of architecture of business is derived from some theoretical and analytical researches. We have seen several elements of this concept implemented already in the big financial institutions. In an enterprise, an architecture of business encompasses full spectrum of activities that lead to design and implementation of an optimal target operating model. The architecture of business comprises four fundamental aspects. The architectural model expressed via business capabilities that will be needed to form and realize the target operating model. The practice conducted by the architects of business who define and design the capabilities. The architectural governance that drives and controls the design and implementation of capability-based business solutions. And the implementation of those capabilities in TOM, which becomes optimal for both corporate strategy and market dynamics. On this slide, you can see what business elements relate to each architectural aspect. In small to medium-sized organizations, the role of architects of business is usually played by the corporate executives at C-level. In the bigger organizations, we delegate this role, that is, rights and duties of constructing the business of the company, to the dedicated senior business experts. The importance of structuring the business capabilities in the way that heads them into the future is the cornerstone of the architecture of business. We decided to focus today on the architectural practice and share with you some methods that translate architectural solutions into the target operating model. Kirill?
Thank you very much, Michael. Indeed, as we spoke several times, we mentioned several times today already, is that the architecture of business is at its heart, is realized in a target operating model. And now we would really like to share with you what are the key elements of that optimized target operating model would be. Michael? In order to do so, we're going to use the operating model canvas framework, which is really a framework of choice when designing operating model. The operating model canvas was developed by a collaborative team of industry leaders and experts led by Andrew Campbell of Ashridge Executive Education, and it complements neatly the business model canvas by Osterwalder. The operating model canvas book was published in the spring of this year. The operating model canvas actually has 6 cornerstone elements. First of those is the process, which are really more like value delivery chains of how organization creates and delivers its value proposition to the final beneficiaries. Although visually not dissimilar from the famous Potter value chains, you know, they have those chevrons we all know and love. Value delivery chains here are really focused on the value delivered to the final client, not to the mothership organization as was originally envisaged by Potter. Second is the organization model. It looks at how the value chain map is structured inside the organization, inside the company. Whether it is a single value chain, whether we have a unit organization, or whether we have a matrix organization. The organization model is more than just an organization chart, because it also includes the roles and responsibilities for each person, team, as well as delegations, for example. The third important element of a target operating model is locations. Locations show where the work is located and what assets are needed at those locations to support the necessary work. Locations will vary from countries and continents to building floor plans, for example, depending on the requirements of the operating model. It is really important to say that when we talk about location, once again, to emphasize the point, it's not only where we will put an office, but also where we will put the sales team, for example, in relation to the operational team in that office. Another important element is the information. Information captures what IT or information technology tools we need to support each process, which of those are needed to be integrated and or developed bespoke, and which can be decentralized and managed on per case-by-case basis. Importantly, information model also identifies business owners of data and applications and how those can interact with them. Finally, we have suppliers. Supplier model identifies which element of the value delivery processes can be outsourced or which must be handled internally because they create unique value, and sets up the nature of collaboration with each supplier. At the very bottom, you also see the management system. Management system defines the common plan and calendars to set targets, make decisions, drive improvement, and manage performance. Management system would also define shared objectives and KPIs based on value delivery chain requirements and the organization model. Please note also that when we talk about the operating model canvas, it is the top 5 elements of which is suppliers, location, value delivery chain, organization, and information, which constitute the 5 core parts of the model. Management system is really a supporting element to link all those together. Michael? Thank you. And now let us bring a bit more detail on each of those points. Because the operating model core toolbox contains just 5 core tools, and there are, of course, many more that can be used to enhance the model, but we are not going to talk about those today. The 5 tools that we have are very easy to use, they're logical, and they communicate extremely well with the audience, especially the senior executive audience who have limited time, limited span, and work on several issues at once. So if we start with the value delivery chain map, it is really at the heart of the operating model, and it is focused on the final beneficiary. It is really important to make sure that we always focus on the client. An organization may have more than one delivery chain, depending on customers it serves. For example, such a straightforward business, even as a personal services, to senior citizens may have actually 2 value delivery chains. One focused on the seniors themselves, and another on their families, because obviously the needs and expectation of those 2 beneficiary groups are clearly different. Any value delivery chain in the model should have between 4 and 8 steps and can be segmented by customer type, need, geography, or product service, mentioned by this. The other step, organization model, is a way of drawing an organization while differentiating between operating work and support work. As we said before, it is really more than an organization chart, because organization model shows clearly how people reporting to the same boss, or maybe even different bosses, will work together. An organization model will have 4 major areas: the policy setters, core operational resources, shared resources, and champions coordinator. Clearly, each of those resources will have a different role, important role to fulfill, yet the division of those roles into operating work and support work will also be clear from the outset. Talking about location is really about making sure that the resources of the assets of the organization are located in the most sensible way. They can be put closer to suppliers, they can be put closer to resources, to customers, and the way that it's going to be located will have an impact on the value delivery chain. Locations part of the operating model canvas look at the stakeholder framework to think about the best location. And it does not have to be about the offices of plants, as we also said. Where to locate a department or a team on the shop floor also need to be thought through to deliver optimum effect. Business and IT blueprints are obviously critical because they enable information capture, sharing, and analysis across boundaries, and because they can automate processes. An IT blueprint is created by mapping the value delivery chain versus organizational units and determining which application and systems are needed, who owns each, and which needs to be integrated or to be left alone. And finally, supplier matrix determines what activities can be outsourced to who and on what basis. It is critically important for any organization to identify which activities in the value delivery chain are key and honestly assess level of its performance through benchmarking with others, for example. Once it is clear, 4 options will emerge. It's continue doing something and getting better at it, to continue doing it if it does not distract from the main objective, design a collaborative agreement, or indeed outsource transactionally if that activity is a common activity and create no unique value. Michael? And here is really a very simple operating model to illustrate how it applies to such well-known organizations as Shell Petroleum Company. As we can see, process-wise, which is at the heart of the graph, Shell is involved in exploration and production activities upstream, refining and retailing downstream, and the gas and power. Those activities clearly target different beneficiaries and therefore represented separately. However, they all share technology development and management of major projects. Organizationally, Shell is structured both as a line of business and a functional matrix. It has primarily an engineering culture with the belief that technology is a solution to most problems, and it is reflected in the way that companies work. Location-wise, although Shell operates in most countries around the world, Shell's core assets, oil fields, are often leased from local governments. Therefore, actually, when selecting where to put the company or a certain office for Shell, a relationship with the local government will be critical to Shell's success, and in many instances will determine the location of their representative office. Information, Shell has several ERP systems in different divisions, but it runs global applications for those functions that have been centralized. Finally, suppliers. Shell has many suppliers, but the most important ones are those who work on major projects and joint venture partners. Now, most of Shell's partners are also suppliers to other oil companies. For example, drilling companies, engineering companies, and so on. And so having a good relationship and mutually beneficial contract with them is important for Shell's business continuity. Michael?
The business capability is an instrument for linking strategy, market, and operations. That's why we put some time to talk about it. In order to effectively and efficiently manage corporate operating model, we have to have a clear understanding whether we have capabilities for particular business task or have not. This is a trivial statement for the relatively stable or slow evolving business environment. That is, we can be confident that tomorrow won't bring us unforeseen changes at the large scale. It becomes a totally different game when the environment changes at the pace we can barely keep up with. In a dynamic market, we have no other choices than to apply the John Kotter's model of operational adaptive and stable parts. We have built an extension to Kotter's model for a dynamic business environment by allowing changes in both adaptive and stable parts, which are not stable anymore. This helps us addressing a short and long-term planning for the strategy and defining capabilities for the observable future in the changed environment. The key innovation is in that we made the capability functionality loosely coupled with the resources needed for its implementation. Also, we equally consider internal and external resources for our business functions and operations. Just to give you an impression of such capabilities lifecycle, we demonstrate a D pattern. The architects of business, D, define capabilities needed for transforming corporate strategy into the composition of business tasks and capabilities. Then capabilities are validated and composed into the business solutions. After that, each approved capability is jointly designed by operational business managers and architects. The design links the functionality with all necessary resources of all types. The new capabilities, which reflect market changes and trends, are developed, while some other capabilities are modified and then delivered into operations via internal and external business services, value chains, processes, and procedures. On this slide, we illustrate how business architects define business capabilities. Architects use a method of cause pyramid for transforming corporate goals and objectives into structures of interdependent business tasks. These tasks represent business capabilities and needed for the realization of the strategy into the TOM. Strategic goals and objectives are decomposed into separate tasks moving top-down the pyramid. Every upper level is the cause why the tasks of the lower level exist. Every lower level task is what should be done or built or gained in order to resolve the related task in the upper level. Each task can be converted in a business capability or a capability combination. As a result, when this work is complete, we have a clear picture of what is needed for realizing the strategy. Moving bottom up from the lowest level of fine-grained capability, we compose coarse-grained level capabilities and continue this assembly process until we reach the strategic goal and objectives. Now, let's talk about an architectural governance. To explain an architectural governance in the architecture business, we have to involve a mathematical notion of recursion. The logic of the recursion is illustrated in the bullet points at the left-hand side of the slide. An architectural governance is the part of the whole enterprise governance, but it influences the whole enterprise a great deal. Particularly, architectural governance oversees business functionality and business information, not necessarily information technology, and because of this, it impacts all other aspects of enterprise and related governance. For example, an operational management governs improvements, refinements, enhancements of business processes, while an architectural governance deals with inputs and outcomes of those processes, keeping them coherent with other operational outcomes. The architectural governance directly works with TOM design and implementation, helping operating managers to resolve systemic problems resulted from the incomplete implementation or environment changes. Kirill?
Thank you, Michael. So I think what's been very clear, what Michael has already mentioned, is that in the governing model, is that there is need is a transparent and firm separations of roles and responsibilities during the operating model to design and implementation journey. Obviously, corporate leadership remains in charge of setting strategy in this objective. Architects of business translate those objectives into capability analysis and operating model design in consultation with stakeholders. And operational leadership implements the operating model in line with the business transformation plan. Now, it's in black and white, and of course, in ideal scenario, that's how it would work. But also, it can work in real life, and it must work because the system does allow for flexibility. And there will be times when the arbitration is needed. Again, architectural business provides the channel for this transparent and accessible arbitration process, and also, which is also quite quick, in order to make sure that all parties remain aligned and nobody goes on and does something on their own accord. Next slide, Michael. And finally, an aspect which is frequently overlooked in operating model design is its impact on organizational culture. Organizational culture, the famous expression being the way things are done around here, will change as operating model changes. The process of change can be painful and slow things down quite a bit, or it can be expedited by focusing on important changes and proactive change management action. Existing corporate behaviors, both explicit and implicit, and their value to the organization, therefore, needs to be assessed versus the architecturally significant behaviors for the operating model. So, as a result of that analysis, some of the existing behaviors, hopefully quite a few, will match the new requirements and will need to be anchored and developed further. Others, as having low architectural significance for operating model design, can be left alone. If they're good, if they're positive, it makes sense. If they're negative, they don't harm anyone. So they're not really a priority. What is the real priority for the change management action is the ones which are critical to the operating model, yet either non-existent or in fact contradictory to the requirement of the new design. And those need to be really, really challenged, and they will become the cultural battleground. They will need to be reevaluated and be made the focus of reinforced change management agenda with training, quick wins, stakeholder assessment, and full arsenal of stakeholder management tools. As we know, transformation efforts often fail, and not because they do not make sense or models are not good, but because the people side of change management was neglected. Just to give you an example, if we have a corporate organization which puts great value on individual performance, or if you like, a maverick culture, but the operating model calls for more teamwork and more shared results, then of course those two cultural traits are often quite conflicting, and so transition from one to another need to be managed carefully for the whole transformation journey to come. So the architecture of business approach includes this focus on change management as an integral part of target operating model design and its implementation. Michael? And this is really concludes, some of the points that we wanted to discuss today. But before we move to questions and answers, I'd really like to share with you some of the most important of thoughts to be taken away from our conversation today. First of those is that the architected target operating model is an explicitly designed target operating. So, which in other words, it is something which has been worked on to fit the corporate strategy in the most effective and efficient way, and connected with the changes in the market dynamics, with the underlying operating structure of the organization. Another one that we spoke today is that the architected TOM requires very strict architectural governance, both on development and implementation stages, and it also needs to deal with changes in the organizational culture or corporate culture when needed.
The design.
Yep, go ahead, Michael.
The design is performed, tested, and validated by expert architects of business, dedicated to achieving strategic objectives while adapting to the changing environment. Those architects of business, people who are architecting the enterprise, spend a lot of time on following the changes in the environment, in the market. And when they adopt a change, they know they expect something which will come next. That's totally different game when getting the changes from outside, like out of the blue. In a well-designed and implemented operating model aimed at reaching strategic goals and objectives, changes in the system of operation, subordination, organization, and finance are not threats. They are not threatening us, but they are oppositely welcome. They are welcomed innovations because they can help implement the most flexible and optimal target operating model in the accelerating changes of environment. That was our last slide about the presentation. Now, thank you very much, and we're ready for your questions. On the slide, you can see our contact information for the emails at Architecture of Business company. And while you're asking the questions, here is a list of recent publications. We're publishing practically every week or every 10 days a new article on different aspects of architecture of business and related architectural, operational, and managerial topics, including technology, by the way. The last one was business capability and API ecosystem, and that was a very unusual at this moment view at whether the APIs are really a big step forward or they bring so much business risks that somebody can be afraid to step forward. So we recommending read these articles at your convenience. Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, you can, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, folks. Now, Kirill.
And of course, you can get in touch with us also on the site if you want, if there is any aspect of what we were talking about today that you would like to discuss further. Now, Michael, we have about 15 minutes left, and I've got a couple of questions coming through to me. So one question is, okay, guys, you talked about the capabilities today. Now, can you say what is actually capability means for you? What does it include and what does not include?
Well, let me try to answer that question. Capability is, in simple words, is what you can do or deliver to provide certain business value or outcome in the given business execution context. It's usually focused onto the future because capability is what you can do, but you cannot do anything without resources. So if you know your task and you don't have resources to do it, you don't have capability in spite of your previous experience. If you have a task and you have resources to implement it, you can schedule that delivery of the capability of the delivery of that value in the future, tomorrow, in a year, in next year, whenever it's needed. This is what we mean by business capability. Capability to be able to deliver certain business value under the given business execution context. Thank you.
And Michael, now second part of the question, so what does it actually do? So what's inside that capability? So you mentioned resources, right? So is inside the capability. What else is inside the capability?
There are two major parts. First part is business functionality, what to do. Second part is resources, but without being assured that the resources are available when they needed and where they needed, you can't rely on your having a capability. So
Right.
the company element of capabilities is sort of assurance or monitoring of resources availability in the market. You're much more aware about the resources inside the company, but sometimes the same or similar resources in the market may be cheaper or maybe more efficient or effective than your internal resources. So you always have to balance between your decision between which resource to use in which situation. And this is the point when you have to anticipate using internal specialists, retraining them, and or looking for the outsourcing solution. Thank you.
Great, Michael. But I think that obviously already then links in with the supply matrix of the operating model, right? So
Yes.
in terms of saying that whether that capability is an important part of your competitive advantage or value delivery chain, right? Or whether it's a less important part but needs to be done. And then based on it, then you can assess on whether you're going to develop the capability or outsource it. But to summarize your answer, right, and I hope that that's what it is that basically that the capability consists of business functionality and resources to support that business functionality to achieve the real world result. Correct?
Correct. I can add only that.
So I hope that it answers.
Yes.
That's fine, Michael. I hope that we had a good discussion. I hope that it answers that specific question.
Yes.
Second question, yeah.
Let me add a little bit more to that about the competitive advantage. Particularly in the dynamic market, competitive advantage now in an ability to change your solution as fast as the market changes. It's not about what you do or how you do. It's about how quickly you can change what you do. Thank you.
Correct. I hope that it answers the questions. And second question that I had that also came through to me was relating to the architectural governance. Now, and the question sounds like this. So Avena was saying that the architects of business actually design corporate governance?
I would not say so that the business design corporate governance. I think it's prerogative of executives and certain regulations where the company, the regimes where the company works in. So it's a composition of them together. The architectural governance is definitely man-developed, hand-developed. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think that that architects of business actually design corporate governance per se. I think that we need to be realistic in that in many instances the corporate design, corporate governance is in a way the collaborative process. If even if only executive teams involved in it, in any case when there is more than one person, it's already a collaborative process. But I think that there certainly should or ought to be a part of that conversation in order to make sure that the operating model or target operating model can function well, effectively and efficiently within whatever governance and the company decides to implement. So I don't think that they drive that discussion, but they certainly should have a seat at the table.
Yes, I think you're right.
That's it. So we have about 10 minutes left, Michael. Have there been any questions on your side?
Not really. I have not seen anyone so far, except the ones that you articulated already.
Okay. No, I think that we've covered what we wanted to achieve. Guys, once again, really thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. and we hope to have a conversation with you soon. And once again, if there are any questions that you have, please connect with us either through LinkedIn or on our website, architectureofbusiness.com. And of course, we will post this webinar, the slide deck, and possibly the voice recording as well, very, very soon for all of you to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.